Now it's almost a little late because when should you plant your food plots in the fall or late summer? And there's no set time for that. I don't like when I see that you should always plant your brassicas on August 1st, or August 15th. You always have to keep in mind, if I'm talking about planting dates, that I'm referring to when I should plant, not necessarily when you should plant, and there is a difference. It's really important to understand these planting dates and how it affects different products or different seeds that you might mix, or seeds you're trying to establish like a perennial for the following year. So we're gonna go over these dates right now. And I want you to think about that, because right now a lot of people are looking at like, boy, we're having a lot of rain right now. I think it's August 5th. We're getting a ton of rain. And there's other places that are telling me, say northern Minnesota, they're looking at it and saying, man, we haven't had rain for several weeks and it doesn't look like we're getting rain for several weeks. Someone in West Virginia was just asking me that this morning on a video I put out about easy no-till plots, and they're saying they're in West Virginia, they're worried about planting brassica, when should they get it in? Boy, the cool thing is you still have a lot of time in those areas, especially in the bulk of the country. So there's still a good window there, and you have to understand that window. I'm going to talk about that. First thing I'll talk about, I'm just going to go through these real quick. Brassicas. Brassica, you know, people say, when should I plant turnips? They'll say, well, when should I plant turnips? When should I plant rape? Well, that's a brassica. Turnips, rape, radish, canola, kale, they're all brassicas. They're in the brassica family. It's like saying yellow clover, red clover, medium red clover, Alsite clover, Ladino clover. They're all the same. It's clover, meaning it's clover. It's still in that same family. Brassicas, I look at when you're north, like when I was up in the UP of Michigan, and we start to get that first frost in the middle of September, then if I had good moisture, the end of July was ideal. And the reason you didn't do it at the beginning of July, because you could plant that, then get a month of drought, and your crop has failed. Moisture increases once you pass mid-July and get into August and then September. So you want to be on the increase for moisture, not in the dead of the summer like July, mid-July. So what I would see is if I had a huge rain event, like right now, we were forecasted for a 64% chance today, 51% tomorrow. You fast forward into Monday, there's another 54% day, and then you have a couple 20 and 30% in there, and then 30% after. So we have several days of moderate to heavy prediction for rain. It's a great time to plant. And if you see that end of July and you're in a northern setting, great time to plant brassica. Now, if you're in West Virginia, and you're just gonna slide the further south you go. So West Virginia, I would say the ideal planting time is the last week of July to first couple days of August in a northern setting. And I'm gonna say North Dakota, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, UP of Michigan, upstate New York, areas that experience that first frost more like mid-September. On the other hand, when you're down in West Virginia, you have till August 15th, August 20th might be your perfect timing in there. But if you don't see rain, I'd wait till about the 20th, 25th, throw the seed out there, and you'll get rain eventually. And most of the time, we had one brassica failure, and that was last year since the late 90s. And that was because put the seed down, barely germinates with just a little moisture, sits on the ground, dries out, dies. We don't get anything for 3 weeks, and it was a big failure. But it's very unusual at that time to get that. In fact, that's the first brassica failure I've had since '99. So, you know, it's been a long time, and that's in Michigan and Wisconsin. Wisconsin starting in 2002. So a long time, long history of planting brassicas at that time with no failures because you get an increase. West Virginia, more mid-August, late August. You could extend that to even southern Ohio, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, over to Oklahoma, Tennessee. There's a pretty big swath there where you're more mid-August to 20th of August, 25th in a pinch. But in that case, you're dealing with that same drought condition, possibly, where if you put that, you're always better planting later, but you don't want to be so late that you miss the optimum growing amount, because brassicas you want to get at least 8 to 10 weeks on. And what I see a lot of times in brassica, that first month you're getting 4 to 8 inches depending on soil, but then that second and third month you're getting another 12 to 15 inches each month. And so when you plant too late, like if I see a Labor Day planting of brassica in Michigan, I'll just say central Michigan or a little bit northern, I'll pick Gaylord or Gladwin area. I'll look at an area like that, Grayling, Clare, Gaylord, West Branch, somewhere in there. And I'll go to a property in the spring in Michigan. April's always a Michigan trip. And I'll look at brassica that's about 2 inches high and stunted. And I can just ask them all the time. I'll say, did you plant that around Labor Day? And that would be correct. So they didn't miss the few inches on the front side. They missed the 12 to 15 inches on the back side because they planted a month late. In those areas, it should be more early August, end of July, depending on moisture levels. So always think about that. There's a slant there. You know, ideally right here in southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, I would say August 1st, August 5th, August 10th, July 27th. If you have good rain and you can see a lot of rain in the forecast, plant any of those time periods. If I'm planting Labor Day around here, it's too late. It's really late. Now, if we get a warm fall and we don't have frost in October, which is very unlikely, I could get a solid 2 months of growth even if I planted August 25th, but not likely. I'm really pushing it at that point with brassica crop. So think about that sliding scale. We're still in the thick of it. In most areas, getting a brassica crop, and except for those extreme northern locations, when you see this video, which might come out, what's today, Dylan? August 5th?
It's the 5th today.
And we need one for Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So you're watching this on Saturday then, I think. So I don't think we're gonna wait till next week, and this might not be a Sunday one. So number 2, greens. Looking at peas, late planted beans, like in our ultimate no-till where you're spreading that into the buckwheat and smashing it, or maybe you're tilling or no-till drilling in late beans so you get that green forage all the way to early November. You want that planted right now, because if you plant it later and you get that early frost, you're not going to get much growth. Deer hammer it. A lot of those greens, you're looking to establish a pattern of use on the plot because it's a candy crop. A lot of times I'm planting that beside brassica, because as the brassica is growing, I want the deer nibbling over here and not on the brassica, because the brassica is what's going to give me volume later and last through the season. So I'm planting my greens, whether it's light oats, beans, peas, tillage radish, even some buckwheat. So you have that early season candy when the buckwheat's really young going into the season. I'm planting that at the same time I'm planting my brassica. So we're planting those side by side. We're using those 2 mixes. So one's over here, one's over here. Something that's interesting about those, and when it comes to mixing, you can mix brassicas with peas. Peas are a legume, so you can mix those effectively. Buckwheat doesn't really compete with brassicas too much, so not a bad mix for those 2. Late planted beans. A lot of times if you're having trouble with brassicas being eaten, then you can add those peas and beans, peas at 50 pounds per acre, beans at 25 pounds per acre, right into your brassica mix, and that's a great plot sweetener. A lot of times when deer aren't eating brassicas because you plant a standalone plot that you think the deer are just going to shift over to here in November, December and start eating, when they've already established their fall pattern somewhere else. So a lot of times they don't just completely relocate. If you don't have fall cover, winter cover, they're not going to be there either. So you always want to plant the same in every food plot, and you want to plant that same mix in every food plot. But you can actually mix these at times too. Those aren't bad to mix because they don't compete. Light oats, 25 pounds per acre, 50 pounds at the most, and I'd prefer more 30 to 40 pounds in that range right there. But that's not going to outcompete the brassica or any of those other ones too. So not bad, same planting dates, because you're planting those side by side with brassicas, or at least at the same time if that's your only planting. Now grains, completely different. Grains should be planted a couple weeks before that first frost date. So UP of Michigan, mid-September, I'm planting around Labor Day. You could plant it mid-August with a light amount of rye and then layer it. I'd always start August 20th, Labor Day, and then the end of the month, I would layer 100 pounds, 100 pounds, 100 pounds, and you're trying to fill space, not overall vertical, but fill space down to the dirt so that you have a horizontal, very thick covering of grains. The problem is rye, wheat, and even heavy oats outcompetes brassica and greens. So if I'm planting rye with peas or rye with brassica, and I'm doing a lot of rye and I'm putting that together, especially the brassica, then it's out competing that brassica. Rye is great because it's got a natural weed suppressant. So weeds, buckwheat, brassica, peas, it can really compete against for nutrients, especially the brassica. And that's why the grains are about 4 weeks after your brassica. So if you're looking at planting grains this year, you still have a lot of time. Someone told me yesterday or the day before that they just planted their wheat and rye. And this is really too early just about anywhere to plant wheat and rye. And maybe in Canada somewhere where it gets, maybe you have your first frost around Labor Day, then that'd be appropriate. But I'm really not sure there's even a place where you'd want to plant your normal heavy rye and wheat right now. That's more Labor Day and later to the end of September. You know, again, going down to Louisiana, I'd be putting in cereal grains end of September, mid-September for that first starting point with cereal grains, and not, in August sometime that far south. You can't mix these. Very bad. 2 different planting timings. We've gone over this before. You want to rotate your crops on either side. So if you have cereal grains over here, brassica over here, you just flip them every year so your brassica is not in the same field twice. A lot of people are just planting the same thing in a food plot, one planting. So if you're mixing all those things together, you can't plant brassica more than 2 years in a row. But bottom line is, it's going to turn your brassicas different colors, stun them. You're going to look at it like, well, maybe the soil's bad. Maybe my seed was bad. Maybe I didn't put enough fertilizer. And really, it's just the rye stunning out the brassica. That's the problem. That's why you don't plant those 2 together. They're about a month apart. Now, number 4, perennial mixes. Some of you want to get clover established for next year. And I'm not even going to get into whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. The bottom line is I've planted a lot of perennial bases with a cool season annual, so I get the benefit of the cool season annual for hunting season with the leftover amount of perennial going into next summer, and then tilling that under as a green manure when I'm trying to build a deer herd. And I did that in the UP of Michigan for years back in the 2000s. It was really effective. People say, well, when should I plant that? You always plant it and let your planting date be determined by your cool season annual. So clover doesn't have a date that you need to plant it by in August or early September. If you're planting cereal grains as a cover crop for your clover and as a deer attraction during the fall, the cereal grains, then you're going to look at, okay, if the Labor Day is a good time for my cereal grains in a northern setting, then I'm going to plant my clover within that mix at that time. If you're in a southern area, and let's just pick Louisiana, and let's say it was more late September, you're planting cereal grains to around October 1st, then that's when you'd plant your clover mix within that planting. So you can combine the 2. You always let your cool season annual determine when you plant. I hope those planting dates make sense. A lot of people want to jump the gun. I know people are very excited about their food plots. It's so much fun to plant. You have new equipment. Your seed bed is ready. You've controlled weeds. You have a big rain event at the end of July, but unfortunately you're in West Virginia and you need to wait till middle of August, 3rd week of August to plant your brassicas. Don't jump the gun too early because you risk drought, destroying your crop, and then you're going to have to follow up and keep an eye on it, because if you have a weed-free plot and you plant too early, you get drought, your brassica doesn't grow, throw some brassica more on the right timing for the brassica. So even in Wisconsin here, if you wait and plant August 10th, that's not a bad time in southwest Wisconsin, southern Michigan. However, if you get 3 weeks of drought and it doesn't germinate, you're not going to follow up with another brassica planting in Labor Day, because you're going to have stunted plants that don't mature and don't fill up volume. So you're going to have to add cereal grain like a rye to actually be that fail-safe and to salvage your plot when it gets more into September. So, really, there's a lot of time for you to plant in a lot of locations right now, even though this is coming out on, I believe, maybe August the 7th on this Saturday. But really important that you pay attention to these dates, but also remember you do have a window in there. Ideally, we're planting right now brassica. We've had lots of rain today, let alone most of the brassicas germinated. I've sprayed glyphosate on it. Right after we plant, you can spray glyphosate. I'm going to mention that because there's been some scuttlebutt on social media that you can't spray rye on seed. Well, folks, I've been doing it for over 2 decades now. A whole lot. Like I have 18 acres of plots this year. I've planted over 20 acres of plots in 2 states, 3 states. So I do it every year, a whole lot, and it works. The glyphosate does not hurt germination. I'm here to attest that. I can tell you glyphosate is a post-emergent. That means it kills things after they're growing, after they leaf out. In fact, ferns, for example, you can spray them when they have that head like this. All you want, you're not going to kill it. It has to open up to an 8-inch leaf. Then you spray it, then you kill it. That's the best time, when it first opens up. Trees, you can spray glyphosate on them when they have buds. But until that bud opens up into an actual leaf, you're not going to kill that plant. And so we've spread our brassica, we've sprayed it. We have no weeds, we're getting moisture, we're getting great germination, even on our brand new plots that we just never tilled or disc. They're doing really well, but I looked in the forecast and saw those rain events coming, and that's what I planned accordingly. So you have to be a little bit of a weatherman. Know that if you have a 40% chance this coming Thursday and there's no chance outside of that, you're really risking it by planting. You look for 4 or 5 days of appreciable rain that should range from 25% to 50 to 60% probability over several days. You're probably not going to get rain every day, but you'll at least get rain one day. And that's what we're seeing right now. We had the probabilities there. We have rain over several days and we're going to get it. So always remember there's a window. Always try to time your plantings with moisture and rain. And never plant too early, never plant too late, and you'll be on the right track. Those are just basic food plotting, basically farming practices where you're looking at the seed you're planting, you're looking at the weather, the rain, you're taking into those factors and you're making a smart decision. Don't let a cleared plot, new seeds that you're excited about or new equipment get in the way of making good decisions when it comes to planting your fall food plots. And there's still time here this year. And I hope this makes sense for the timing of a great food plot for your hunting season success this fall. Well, I'm real excited, folks. I appreciate you watching this video, but my next web class, How to Plant Food Plots, How to Design Your Food Plot Program, is out. And it really goes through a step-by-step process for not only how to plant your food plots, but why you should plant them, where you should plant them, what you should plant, how you should create them. There's a lot of different modules. Ends up about 30 videos altogether. I urge you to check that out. We're out here completing our food plot work today, and we do that in a pretty strict pattern so we can find success this fall. Food plots shouldn't be a guessing game. Take the guesswork out of food plots and food plots planting, and check out the web classes. I have my How to Design Your Whitetail Property, the food plots for the next web class in the series, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you check it out, and let me know what you think if you end up purchasing that, and I think you'd be well pleased that you did.